July 2020 was a busy month for immigration news in the United States. A lot changed and also stayed the same. If you're a parent, you might be familiar with this situation. You set out ground rules for everyone in the family. Your child doesn't want to follow them, so they appeal to one parent or the other adult. They are hopefully told to follow them. The child refuses to follow your rules and they do whatever they want. As a good, consistent parent, you then punish them. Then they have a decision to make. They have to decide if the punishment is worse than not doing what they want. If they do what they want again and violating your rules for the second time, you have to decide if you're going to increase the punishment or are you going to give up and let them do whatever they want. That is what it feels like we are experiencing with the Trump administration and U.S. immigration. They've been told what to do by the courts, including seemingly saying, I don't care what any of them say, I'm going to do what I want. In the immigration field, many of us are left shaking our heads saying, that's not how it works. That is not how any of it works. But, and here's the problem, if this administration is not going to follow what the Supreme Court and federal judges and the law and policy say is the right thing to do, who is going to punish them? How is this administration going to be punished? And most importantly, while the punishment is being decided, if there is one, because the Republican Senate so far has pretty much let this administration do whatever it wants, how many thousands of people are going to be negatively impacted? This administration has chosen their own path for DACA, for student visas, exchange students. And now they're saying they will change U.S. immigration to a merit-based immigration system. We also found out that while USCIS said they were running out of money, they weren't entirely honest about that. They're still sending furlough notices to employees and claiming they will, in essence, lay off up to 70% of its workforce by the end of August without more money. USCIS has updated their website and stopped paying for the printing of green cards and work authorizations that have already been paid for and approved. So over 125,000 of these people are in limbo. With all of that, you can see we have a lot to cover on our July 2020 U.S. Immigration Update.
Calificas para ser legal, quieres saber, solo llama al abogado Andrés Mejer.
I'm Andres Mejer. I'm an attorney who's also an immigrant. I have been where most of my clients have been, living in the U.S. without legal status. And before becoming an immigration attorney and trying to figure out the mess that is the U.S. immigration system. I'm also today a U.S. citizen, and I work hard as an attorney to make sure my clients, who are all throughout the U.S. and the world, aren't treated the way that me and my family were. I want you to understand the process and for it to be as smooth as possible. If you have any questions, drop them below and we will do our best to answer them. So let's get started. But before I do, let me know, where are you watching? And hopefully you're enjoying the show. Let's get started. First, we're gonna talk about DACA. I know we've talked a lot about DACA, but there was an important decision this week. What is DACA? All of you should know by now. It stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It is a protection from deportation and gives work authorization if you meet certain requirements only. It does not give legal status and it does not give you a path to legal status, but with advanced parole, there is a way that you can get your green card. How did we get to where we are today with DACA? In August 15, 2012, President Barack Obama instituted the program. On September 5th, 2017, Trump administration rescinded DACA in a memorandum issued by then Acting Secretary Elaine Duke. Following the rescission, multiple lawsuits were filed challenging the termination. Multiple injunctions were issued throughout the country directing the government to partially maintain the program. On June 18, 2020, 6 weeks ago, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision saying the administration could not end DACA the way they did. The district courts in July ordered the government to start accepting new DACA petitions. This was July 17, 2020. On July 28th, 2020, like 3 days ago, the government decided it won't in another memo. What does the Supreme Court decision on DACA really mean? So let's talk about that. On June 18, 2020, SCOTUS blocked the government's attempt to terminate DACA and remanded the case back to federal court. The 5-4 decision issued by Chief Justice Roberts ruled the following. 1. The court has jurisdiction to review Department of Homeland Security's decision rescinding DACA. And that's an important one because the government was arguing that the courts had no permission, no authority to review its decision. So, number one, they have the right. Number two, the court said DHS was arbitrary and capricious in 2 ways. That really means that what DHS did not make sense. There wasn't a good reason to do what they did. First, the agency, DHS, failed to consider important aspects of the problem before the agency, like whether they should consider only the protection from deportation or only work authorization. In other words, DACA provides protection from deportation and it provides work authorization. So there's a way to maybe end work authorization but keep protection from deportation, or vice versa. The fact that they didn't even consider it by itself was arbitrary and capricious. Secondly, they failed to consider the reliance on DACA by immigrants, their communities, and their employers. Again, just by not even addressing it. There's all sorts of ways. So think of students that have DACA and are in college. Well, okay, let them continue it until after they finish their studies or their program or their contract. There are ways to minimize the harm to others, and by fact of not considering it at all, it was arbitrary and capricious. Lastly, the court agreed that Department of Homeland Security can rescind DACA, but only if it's done correctly. And the court advised DHS that it needed a reasoned explanation to terminate the program. And it remanded the matter, advising DHS to consider the problem anew. That's a direct quote. Go back and think about it, basically. That was June 18th, 2020. Just over a month later, on July 28th, 2020, what does the government do? It issues a memo authored by Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. And this memo flies in the face of the Supreme Court decision and a decision by Paul Grimm, District Court Judge in Maryland, on the case of Casa de Maryland versus Department of Homeland Security, which said the government must accept new applications. So this memo, issued just a couple days ago, says, 1, they are going to reject all initial DACA applications. 2, they're going to reject all advanced parole applications from those that have DACA unless they show exceptional circumstances. Remember, I did a video explaining why DACA recipients should file for advanced parole. I'll link to that in the comments. 3rd, they're going to shorten the DACA renewal period from 2 years to 1 year. This effectively doubles the cost from $495 every 2 years to $495 per year. Also, keep in mind, the government already said it was going to increase the cost to $765 per year. So now we're really talking about from $495, or let's say $500 every 2 years, to now over $1,500 in the same period. That's more than 300% price increase. So where do we go from here? Where are we? Supreme Court says you must accept new application. You can't rescind the program, so you go back to accepting new DACA applications because that's where it was before you stopped the program. District Court, following that, says, yes, government, you must accept new applications. And then 2 weeks later, government says, I'm not doing it. So this memo is really troubling. Trump again demonstrates that he believes he and his administration are above the law. It clearly defies the Supreme Court decision and the District Court decision. When the Supreme Court told the administration to produce new justifications for ending DACA, the court didn't say, hey, you can terminate the program before you consider and before you issue that process. It definitely did not do that. The government has already been found to be arbitrary and capricious by the Supreme Court. a district court will likely see their response as also arbitrary and capricious. So we are telling our clients to file for DACA and to be prepared to sue the government if they are denied. You need to be prepared to fight for your rights. This administration hopes you won't file. It hopes you won't fight. It hopes you will just accept their decision that they're not going to accept anymore and they won't file. And that's wrong. Let's move on to what's happening with foreign exchange students. There are two types of visas issued for exchange students, the F1 and the M1. As part of the permission to study here in the US, exchange students are not allowed to take more than a certain percentage of their classes online. Typically, it's one class or 3 credit hours per semester. In March, when the US decided, hey, we're in that pandemic, USCIS said that foreign exchange students would be able to take online classes during that pandemic. In July, by surprise, issued a statement on July 6th, right after the 4th of July weekend, saying that student visa holders whose schools were offering online-only classes in the fall needed to leave the US or they would be deported. And they also said that any students arriving in the US for classes that were going to be 100% online would be turned away at the border. Schools found out the Department of Homeland Security was changing the online policy that had been published in the spring, and that if they were offering online-only classes in their fall, their student visa holders would not be allowed to attend. They found out in the news, just like everybody else. Additionally, the schools would have to issue new I-20 forms for every student visa holder within weeks and notify DHS of instructions of what they would be offering even sooner. This came as a complete surprise to pretty much everyone. Students, schools, administrators, states. There was an immediate uproar. Why? Because foreign exchange students bring quite a bit of money to the U.S. economy. There's $43 billion in 2018 alone. They support over 45 jobs throughout studying in the U.S. Not to mention, there's 1.1 million visa holders in the U.S. So for some colleges, take Rutgers for example, I believe they have 9,000 exchange students. MIT and Harvard had about 4,000, 5,000 apiece. For some colleges, like in California, where they have tens of thousands of foreign exchange students, it's a very big deal, particularly when you have to act like that. MIT and Harvard sued for an injunction within days. Quickly, 17 other states also sued, including several Republican-led states. The U.S. attorney asked for more time to respond. The judge said no. She explained, if you're going to require the schools to send information within a short period of time, you, the government, will have to do the same thing and answer in the same period. You chose the time. It's your decision. Postpone the date if it's too close. The administration dropped the change. Sort of. There is still a new policy. Anyone who was enrolled in a course of study as of March 9th, 2020, even if that course was fully online, is still allowed to be here in the US and continues to study. But DHS is not approving visas for anyone who applied to and was accepted to any institution that is conducting online-only courses this fall. If anything changes about this, we will let you know. Now we'll address what is happening with changing U.S. immigration to a merit-based system. First, let me explain to you what this means. Merit-based means that someone would be admitted to the U.S. because of their education or finances. Currently, the largest percentage of people who immigrate to the U.S. do so under a family-based system. That means that you are sponsored by a family member, spouse, sibling, parent, child who's a green card holder. So spouse, sibling, parent, or child who's either a green card holder or a U.S. citizen. That sponsor agrees that the immigrant will not use any government assistance for a certain period of time, and if they do, the sponsor will pay for it. This isn't cheap or a simple process. You must, for the most part, pay all the application fees. You must get a background check. You have to pass medical screening. You have to have an interview, sometimes more than once. And even if you go through all this and you're approved, Customs and Border Patrol still has the discretion to turn you away at the border or at an airport. Doesn't happen often, but it can happen. If, for example, after you were approved, you were convicted of a disqualifying crime. So it can happen. It also isn't a fast process. The fastest is for U.S. citizen spouses living in the U.S., but that is taking 1 to 2 years currently for a green card to be issued. The U.S. does have a merit-based system of sorts, currently with their employment-based immigration. It's even slower than a family-based system, sometimes taking 2 or 3 years or longer for approval. And it is much more expensive. It's not like going to Canada where you fill out an application, you get an answer pretty quickly. President claims that this new merit-based system is going to take care of DACA. Okay, President believes that the Supreme Court decision for DACA gives him the authority to change to a merit-based U.S. immigration system without having Congress involved in the process. Again, are we no longer a system of checks and balances? Are we no longer a democracy where the president can say and do whatever he wants? He claims that the new merit-based system is designed to protect American workers. Experts across the board say this isn't true. The current requirements for employment-based visa requires that employers publish job notices in local papers but aren't able to find qualified candidates, so those jobs are not being taken away from American workers. If I'm an employer and I want to hire a particular immigrant, I have to prove that I tried to find, that I posted, that I published a position, that I interviewed other candidates, and this is the most qualified candidate. Reducing immigration as he has, experts say, will continue to negatively impact the economy because the average annual labor force growth will be reduced by 50%. In other words, the number of new employees year over year is actually going to go down by 50% if we don't have immigrant labor. The reduced immigration is also going to slow the recovery from the negative impacts of COVID on the economy. These are what experts are saying across the board. We would like to say that Trump won't be able to change immigration to the U.S. so drastically because he's not following the proper steps. However, as we have seen, Trump doesn't act like the law applies to him. Let's change the subject now to USCIS, that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. What is going on with the agency? That's the agency that approves most green card applications and citizenship applications. They've been saying that they're running out of money because of COVID. USCIS has saying that they need to furlough employees because they're running out of money because of the decreased application fees that they received, and they said they sent this information to Congress in May, asking for increased funding informally of $1.2 billion for the end of this fiscal year. Congress has said the Trump administration needs to file a formal request for the money, but the administration has refused to do that. Turns out USCIS miscalculated and actually has more money from applications than they thought. And now they have pushed off the furloughs from August 3rd to August 31st. It has been said for over a year that USCIS mismanages their money, yet this administration doesn't seem to be doing anything to change that. No one is really sure what is going to happen, which just adds to the stress for immigrants. Now, in the time of COVID, what happens if USCIS asks you for more documents, called a request for evidence, or of a notice of intent to deny? So what are they? If you apply for an application, let's say it's a green card, and immigration reviews it, if they send you a request for evidence, it generally means, hey, I think you can prove your case, but they need you to show me the following. Notice of intent to deny, that's where USCIS says, I don't think you're going to prove your case, and I'm going to deny it for the following reasons, but gives you an opportunity to respond. So what happens in COVID when maybe your attorney's office is closed? Maybe you're not getting the mail as quickly as you used to. Maybe it's difficult to get documents to prove things. Well, when you file any application, again, whether it's a green card or citizenship, immigration could give you this response. How do you respond now? What USCIS has announced is that it's extending the deadlines. RFE is typically for 84 days. Notice of intent to deny is typically for 33 days. So USCIS is extending each one of those deadlines for 60 days, as long as the request was received between March 1st and September 11th. So you get an extra 2 months to respond. The 84 days just became 144. The 33 days just became 93 days. Hey, have you been approved for work authorization or green card but haven't gotten your card? You're not the only one. USCIS decided it was going to start printing the green cards and work authorizations itself rather than outsource them to printing companies. They claim that because of the budget shortfall, they didn't have the money to purchase equipment or to train staff to print cards. At the same time, they stopped paying the printers in June. So there are 50,000 green cards and 75,000 work authorizations that have been paid for and approved but not printed. At this point, we don't have any answer for what people can do who have not received their cards yet been approved, other than suing the government. It is fundamentally unjust. It's like me buying a car, and they don't give me the car. I paid for it, why don't you give it to me? As far as I'm concerned, it's a breach of contract. The moment this changes, we will let you know. Other important news, what happened with the public charge? So let's end with some good news. July 29th, 2020. Guess what? That was like 4 days ago. New York federal judge George P. Daniels issued 2 nationwide injunctions about the public charge rule that Department of Homeland Security started applying on February 24th, 2020. We've discussed the public charge rule extensively. If you look below, you'll see a link to one of those videos. Public charge is very simply, think of it as a wealth test. The government is saying, okay, you applied for your green card. Now, are you wealthy enough so that the government doesn't have to support you in the future? If you're not, they're going to deny your green card. Judge Daniels said in one injunction, he halted nationwide enforcement of the new public charge rule during any period when there is a national health emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Second injunction was to stop the U.S. Department of State from applying this policy to applicants for visas at U.S. embassies and consulates abroad. While there's a pandemic, the public charge rule does not apply. So you should apply immediately. Don't wait. Speaking of U.S. embassies and consulates, hey, are they open? When are they going to open for visa services? You need to check the website for each individual consulate or embassy. It really depends on the condition in that country. The Department of State has advised that they will start reopening after July 13, 2020. That was 2 weeks ago. There are some embassies already open. Well, there you have it. Everything that happened in July in the U.S. on immigration. We are sure there will be more updates in August, so stay tuned to our channel as we issue those. We appreciate your support and shares. If you like our content, please follow and subscribe. When we find out anything we think is important in immigration news, we will let you know. See you next week.